As said, we'll learn most here by doing this all in a large demo. So let's configure authentication in our application now using Auth0. Now I will add authentication to the application itself, and we're going to follow the steps I just outlined in the slides. First, we will create an appsettings.json file, a static file that will live in the www root directory, and it will contain the values that we just copied from Auth0. Replace its default contents with the Auth0 node, containing authority and client ID, and as said, paste in your values you just copied in the previous demo. Watch out, when you copy them from Auth0, it didn't start with HTTPS. The value in here needs to start with HTTPS. The second step was adding the authentication NuGet package. Head over to NuGet, so manage NuGet packages, and add the Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components WebAssembly authentication package. We also need to bring in a script reference in the index.html. So we'll go there and add a reference to the authentication service.js, which comes bundled with the authentication library. Here you see the same syntax being used that we used before when referencing static files from a library. This script will help us with executing the authentication operations on the client side. On to the third step. With the package added, we can now go to the program.cs and add the required extra services to the DI container. We're using here the add OIDC authentication that is not specific to Auth0, that comes with the authentication package, but can be used for Auth0 since that is an OIDC provider. We are, however, configuring it to use the Auth0 section parameter from the appsettings.json. In this line here, we are specifying the flow we want to use, and that here is the authorization code flow. Now we can, as part of the fourth step, start making adjustments in the app itself. First, head over to the imports and bring in the Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components authorization and Microsoft ASP.NET Core authorization using statements. With these added, we will continue in the app razor itself. Take a look at the changes that I've done here. I'm using the authorized route view here within the fount. As the name gives away, this will be looking to see if the user is authenticated to see the requested page. While doing so, this content is shown, and if the user isn't allowed to see the requested page, the not authorized content is shown. This information will be made available through the cascading authentication state component, which surrounds the router. This is filled up automatically by Blazor's authentication system, and its built-in components use this to get authentication information, and we can use this manually too. Next, we will need to create two components, one to let the user log in and another one to show the status of the authentication. So it'll show the username if they're logged in. First, let's work on the component that'll let us perform the login. I'll call that Authentication Razor. Here is the code for this component, and I've put this in the Pages folder. Remember that we added in Auth0 a few URLs for login callback and logout? Well, using these in the app actually requires that we create a page in the app that'll be handling these different authentication stages, and that'll be this page. It contains the Remote Authenticator View component, and that manages the user's authentication status and will interact with the authorization server on the Auth0's side. It's again a component that comes with the authentication package, but that we can use in combination with Auth0. For logging in, there's no extra code needed, but for the logout, as we can see, some extra logic is needed. This is needed to disconnect from Auth0. Next, I've added another component, and this time in the Components folder, since it's not a full-page component. This is the Authentication Status component, and you can see its code here. This component will place in the layout, and it'll be used to show whether or not the user is logged in. If not, then the login link is shown, and if they're logged in, then the username is shown, as well as a button to log out. That is then redirecting us to the authentication page /logout, which then triggers the logout process. This is all again using the authorized view. Here is the updated main layout with this component now included. With this, the application is correctly configured, I think. We can now test it. Here is the running application. We can now log in. We'll be redirected to Auth0. Let's log in here. And now we have authenticated successfully in the application. Although we cannot authenticate in the application, it is still possible to directly navigate to the pages and bypass authentication. We'll fix that in the next demo.